Hello, and welcome to Politics at Jack and Sam's Daily, the podcast that gets you up to speed with everything happening in the day ahead in British politics in under 20 minutes.
Good morning. It's Monday, the 30th of September, and Conservative Party Conference, the bonus episode on the conference season, has finally arrived. My name is Sam Coates of Sky News, and with me is Jack Blanchard of Politico, and we are both in Birmingham. And if you thought Liverpool was wet, Jack, oh my goodness, it has been flooding overnight. The rain was dripping off my hotel window, keeping me awake at point. But has it affected the mood?
Well, I would say the mood is a little bit more upbeat than you might have expected for a party that has just been completely crushed in a general election. I would say people are quite jolly. There's a sort of resigned sense about people. There's a lot of sort of black humour and a lot of jokes being made about the state of the Tories. But no, I don't think the mood is quite as grim as you might expect. However, let's see what an entire day of heavy rain does to people. It was certainly dampening the mood at Labour last week, and I'm sure it'll do that here as well.
I had lots of people quoting you back at me last week, attributing the bad mood to the rain. I think the Tories are just going to be in better fare. I didn't make it to the big 1922 party, Conservative Home Party last night at a swanky top floor venue, but colleagues who were there said a lot of champagne was drunk, a lot of champagne. It's an awful long way since that 2009 Eric Pickles ban when they stopped the bubbly at party conference. Now they're looking like they're drinking to celebrate and drinking to forget.
The weird thing about being here is that the news agenda is very much not here in Birmingham at the Conservative Party conference, and maybe that's to the benefit of the Conservative Party, who can say, but clearly the backdrop of the violence escalating in the Middle East is really overshadowing everything in terms of the wider news agenda. We've got Israel striking Beirut overnight with airstrikes. We've got Israel apparently gearing up for what looks like a ground invasion of Lebanon with tanks and troops massing on the country's borders, Sam. So, there's only so much that people's attention is going to be focused on this here today.
All of that following the Israeli assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah on Saturday. Now, we are going to stay on mission on this podcast and not get into the politics of what's happening overseas today. But let's just trot through, as we always do on a Monday morning, what's happening for the whole of the week, Jack?
Yeah, so the action politically is very much here in Birmingham today. We've got Jeremy Hunt, the Shadow Chancellor, on stage this morning. We've got Liz Truss, remember her, the former Prime Minister, is doing a fringe event at lunchtime, which will be entertaining, no doubt. And then at 2 o'clock, the main thing today is the first two leadership contenders will be grilled on stage for an hour each. Tom Tugendhat at 2 o'clock, then Kemi Badenoch at 3 o'clock. We've got the other two on stage tomorrow, but it's very much their day today. And one other thing to watch out for tonight, Sam, all four leadership contenders are at the CPS, which is another Tory think tank event at 8 p.m. tonight, where all four of them will be on stage for more Q&A, this time chaired by the former leader Ian Duncan Smith. So plenty of opportunities today to see the leadership contenders in action.
Yeah, I think over the course of the next 3 days, the four of them on stage together at various fringe events will become increasingly a scene conducted through gritted teeth. So tomorrow you've got the other two candidates, Robert Jenrick and James Cleverly, on stage facing questions from Christopher Hope of GB News. Of course, he's doing it. He's doing a sort of mini interview and taking questions after several of the candidates objected to that role being done by Camilla Tominley of The Telegraph and GB News because she'd written some stuff about in favour of Kemi Badenoch that several of the campaigns objected to. So even that has been the subject of some pretty internecine briefing and hostility. The other big thing on Tuesday, the American vice presidential debate. So we will get to see J.D. Vance versus Tim Walz.
Wednesday, hooray, it's the final day, and all four leadership candidates will be on the main stage to give their leadership candidate speeches. They get 20 minutes each, and we're all looking forward to that, if you're not sick of them all by Wednesday. Perhaps
some of them wanted 40 minutes, by the way.
40 minutes, good grief, can you imagine? Life is too short, guys. Also on Wednesday, Keir Starmer goes to Brussels for the first time as Prime Minister to meet the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen for a very important summit as they start to talk about how they can get a closer union between the UK and the EU. And on Thursday, just one Parliament stays in recess for the rest of the week, but I would flag on Thursday that Boris Johnson Does the first of his big TV interviews to coincide with his book. He's on BBC One with Laura Koonsberg, and I'm sure lots of people will be tuning in for that as well. And I think that's about it, Sam. I mean, for the week anyway, Tory conference is very much the thing this week, whether the Tories like it or not in terms of domestic politics. And so we are going to spend an awful lot of time talking about them. Where are we? Just give listeners a sense of where this is all up to at this point, Sam, in terms of the contest itself.
If you want to understand why things are happening as they're happening here in Birmingham, you have to understand kind of what point in the leadership contest cycle we are in. Right, so we're mid-leadership contest. But whilst it might feel like here in Birmingham, everything is geared towards the four candidates, James Cleverly, Tom Tugendhat, Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick, talking to the members, actually, we are still in the middle of the phase where MPs are critical. The 121 MPs that the Conservative parties were returned with on July the 4th are continuing to be the power brokers in this contest. We've got four candidates at the moment. A week on Wednesday, that will be reduced to three. A week on Thursday, that will then be reduced to two. And only at that point do the 170,000 odd members vote, and we get the result on Saturday, the 2nd of November. So this contest remains incredibly unpredictable because small numbers of MPs changing their minds and reallocating their votes after their preferred first choice candidate are kicked out still has the capacity to put anybody, any one of the top four, in the job. And so what's really going on here in Birmingham is it's the conversation between those MPs that in some ways matters more. Let me just remind you what the benchmark is from the last round of voting that we saw on the 10th of September. Robert Jenrick has 33 votes at last count. Kemi Badenoch has 28, and James Cleverly and Tom Tugendhat both had 21. And Mel Stride was eliminated in that round, so they're all fighting over his 16 votes. And really, you can see a path to any combination, in pretty much any combination, but in the final round when it goes to the members.
What's really interesting, Sam, is the general sense here, and I was walking around various fringe events yesterday and going to see different people speak. You get a real sense of a party that is very much speaking to itself at the moment. I've been to, 12 Tory conferences or something like that now. They've always been the party of government when I've been here. Tory conference has always been this big, glitzy, shiny event with huge security, because, of course, the Prime Minister would always be here. Prime Minister's not here this year for obvious reasons. There will be loads and loads of very senior business people and lobbyists milling around trying to lobby the government of the day. And you have this very big event, and a lot of what the Tory party will be doing will be speaking to those business figures and trying to speak to the country. None of that is happening this year. The whole thing feels shrunken. It's like the tide has gone out on the Tory party, and all that's left are these sort of very internally focused Tory people, some of whom used to be very important, talking to each other about the future of the party and what went wrong with the election. And it's just a completely different vibe. Not a particularly unhappy vibe, surprisingly, as we were saying earlier. There's lots of people making jokes. I don't think I've seen a single event that hasn't started with a joke about Keir Starmer's freebies so far. Lots of black humour about the state of the election result and where it's left the party. But very much a party that's talking to itself about which direction it ought to go in. And all around you have these four leadership contenders who feel like they have to walk around in a sort of squad of people. I don't know if you've seen them marching around the place, but every so often you'll see like Kemi Badenoch walk past, flanked by like 6 supporters, like some sort of mafioso boss, or James Cleverly with his gang of people, and they sort of get these entourages marching through the conference centre to try and show that, we're the new power brokers in town. All very, very different to what it used to be like when you'd see, the Prime Minister strolling through or the Chancellor strolling through. This is a party in a very different state to one that certainly I've ever seen it before.
The vibe is undoubtedly odd. I do wonder whether the Conservative Party here in Birmingham is just a little bit too optimistic about where they are at the moment. I know that's a strange thing to say, but I've had a lot of conversations. It was less than 100 days ago that the Conservative Party went down to the worst defeat by seats that it has ever had in its history. And I know all the arguments about Labour's vote share not being above 40%, being a lot below that, and that there are a lot of Labour seats that are marginal, and that maybe Reform will collapse because it's a one-man band with Nigel Farage, and perhaps those votes are just going to flood home. And yes, Labour has been having a bumpy time, not least this weekend with the resignation of the party whip of Rosie Duffield. But I would very gently suggest that it's going to take a little bit more than just watching your opponents have a difficult time to put yourself back in the driving seat as a party of government. I kind of think by the time election day came around, the Conservative Party had sort of three different economic directions, very little coherent social policy, uncertainty about what it was doing with the NHS and education. None of that really is massively on the table in this leadership contest. They're all sort of talking as if it's going to be easier than it is. But in a few weeks' time, once this contest is out of the way, they might find the phone just doesn't ring and they really struggle to gain attention. And that's the point. In the kind of dark depths of winter, I think it'll feel quite difficult.
Absolutely right. Although equally, I would just make the point that it's very easy just to dismiss all this and say, oh, it doesn't matter. The Tories are out of power for a decade. Whoever wins this probably won't even make it through to the next election as leader of the opposition. All of that might be true, but equally, we have seen over the last few years how very quickly the pendulum can swing, how unexpectedly politics can twist and turn. So I would say that whoever wins this race to be leader of the opposition is still something very, very much worth focusing on. Let's talk a little bit about how the race has gone so far while we've been here, Sam. I mean, Kemi Badenoch is obviously the most interesting candidate of these four. If you're a journalist, she is the one that you want to watch and talk about and speak to and listen to, because she says things that none of the others are going to say, and that is seen as her superpower by her supporters and her Achilles heel by her detractors. And that was on full display here on Sunday at Tory conference, where she started off the day, really making waves with an op-ed in the Telegraph, where talking about multiculturalism and making some very, very, she said not controversial, but clearly pretty controversial comments about multiculturalism, which dominated the conversation in the morning. And then by lunchtime, she'd said something else very controversial about maternity pay, and that is now on the front page of several newspapers this morning and really dominated the conversation here on Sunday afternoon, and I suspect will continue to today, and she's going to be asked about it on the stage. So she has the power to grasp the conversation in this leadership contest, which none of the others do, I would suggest. However, whether that is to her detriment or is actually going to help her remains to be seen. Feels like yesterday did not go well for Kemi Badenoch. The comments she made on maternity pay, and we should talk about them. She says she was misconstrued, but every other camp seized upon them. She was first of all forced to put out a clarifying tweet, then a clarifying video, then she was talking to Sky News about it. Now, any time a candidate keeps having to clarify their comments about something, something's gone badly wrong with the comms.
I was talking to one of her earliest backers yesterday who said that they think the reason that Kemi should be leader is because the goal should be that when the Tory leader appears on telly, on Sky News, people unmute her because they want to hear what she's going to say.
See, I would do that. I would definitely do that. Every single time I will unmute her.
She's passed that test, but as you say, not necessarily for the reasons that she wants. I think that the row over maternity pay is instructive, and I think there'll be disappointment. It's made the front pages of lots of papers. She appeared to suggest that statutory maternity pay places an excessive burden on businesses, and women need to take more personal responsibility for their finances when they have children. She was speaking to Times Radio at the time and said that the present system amounted to a tax on business, and warned that the burden of regulation on firms was too high. Now, when you listen to the full exchange on Times Radio, it is interesting, because she does say that maternity pay places an excessive burden on businesses and is excessive. But she seems to be trying to make an argument, a broader argument, that every time there is a problem, the Conservatives' answer to that problem has been to throw more public money at it. And she's trying to make an argument that over the last few years, the Conservatives have, in her words, talked right and governed left, and just throwing cash at issues has got to stop if the Conservative Party is going to return to its roots. Now, that broader argument is no less bold, but it is vitally important that you communicate it in a way that doesn't generate headlines like the one that she said, forcing her to row back and sort of row in behind maternity pay as a concept in of itself just a few hours later. And what's fascinating is that behind the scenes at this conference, there are sort of two arguments going on. There's the argument about the leadership, and then there's an argument about what's the point of the Tories? Should they be advocating massive kind of discussions about how the NHS should function, where the limits of the state should be, and whether or not they should be completely redrawn? And then every time these issues come up into the leadership contest, they get seized upon by opponents and slapped down. So the question is, for all of those who want the Conservative Party to kick off a really big philosophical debate about the future of our country, it's like, will the rest of the party let them have it? Because anytime a candidate needs to be bold, and that's what Kemi's trying to be, the whole of the rest of the system just slaps them down and shuts them down.
It's very rare that you see Kemi Badenoch feeling obliged to clarify her previous comments. You know, she is an extremely good communicator when she wants to be. She can be very forcefully and very eloquently put very controversial points across, and we saw that on the interview she did on Sunday morning. This one, clearly, I mean, if you read back very closely what she was saying, it appears, and her subsequent clarifications, she says she was trying to make a broader point generally about the burden on businesses. The problem is, it was in answer to a very specific question from Times Radio's Kate McCann about, is maternity pay too high? Is the current level too high? And she launches off into this thing about the burden being excessive. How else is that going to be construed when you're answering that specific question? You know, she's come out fighting, saying that, you know, the other camps are trying to spin what she said, the media is trying to spin what she said, which is her very much de facto, you know, go-to when she's under pressure. But she said these words in response to that question about, is maternity pay too high? Now, if you're a great communicator, then like, how else are people going to read that? I had to listen to it 3 times before I could sort of see the point that she was trying to make in her defense. Well, that's no good if you're a political communicator. Members of the public are not going to listen back 3 times to trying to pick apart what you said. Oh, well, maybe she was making a general point about it. It just doesn't work like that. And I think for Kemi Badenoch, the problem is that things like this are going to keep happening, and Tory MPs know that things like this are going to keep happening. And if Kemi Badenoch became leader of the opposition, or indeed prime minister, things like this would keep happening. And there are lots of Tory MPs who feel very, very nervous about that.
She should know better for this reason. She is the candidate that everybody is out to get at this conference. So if you're Robert Jenrick, you're out to get Kemi Badenoch because you want a different second candidate on the ballot because you think you can beat the rest of them, but maybe not her. If you are Tom Tugendhat and you're James Cleverly, your only path to getting on into the members round is to eliminate her because Robert Jenrick has seemed too far in front. Because she is so feisty, people think that Kemi Badenoch is nobody's second preference in this contest. People are either supporting her or they're not. She's not like the cuddly alternative, as some see Tom Tugendhat or James Cleverly to the top dog. There is a feeling in parts of the party they are less comfortable with Kemi getting the job, and so she is more vulnerable. So these bold attempts to start a different type of conversation put her at more risk. You just have to look at Andrea Jenkins yesterday. You know, she was the only one ready to come out very, very hard on record to talk about the hypocrisy of Badenoch's comments on maternity pay, and says, you know, she was only a minister for about a week and then took 6 months off. She has a target on her back in this contest for doing exactly what she's just done.
And she has managed to dominate our conversation for an entire 20 minutes, Sam. The big question today then is, can Kemi Badenoch turn it around? Can she get the pressure back on the others? We will all be watching on stage to see if that happens. And will we be spending tomorrow morning 20 minutes talking about Kemi Badenoch? Let's wait and see. Sam, it's been lovely chatting to you, and we will see you all tomorrow.
See you then.